The readings in this first weekend of November fall well, for they invite us to look beyond. We cannot avoid the issue. It is the one common denominator. Man is born to die. Just behind me I have the mystery of death in the form of one of the most ancient insurance policies against death of the ancient world at all. It's New Grange. There they were, 500 years before the pyramids, doing what those of the pyramids were also trying to do, and using something similar to do it with. The brightest, the greatest known was the sun. And so they're trying to harness the sun, they're trying to do something rather than just go without an insurance policy into the dark, which is a dangerous place. This then was the world of the shades. In the early period of the Old Testament, something of that is there, but as time goes on, they are given a clearer indication and intuition with regard to the fullness of what is in the beyond. And when it comes to the time of the Maccabees, here, only in the last period before the Lord's coming, we're talking here about 150 BC roughly, we have what is going on in the mind of these martyrs of Israel. They are going with hope, and genuine hope, in the resurrection. That is quite clear even in today's reading. So what is the backdrop to this reading? Essentially, it's what happened as a result of the initial conquest of that great warrior, Alexander, called the Great, because of his many conquests. Remember how they got as far as the Hindus, and his soldiers said, "This far and no further." But he was conquering the whole known world. So he conquered, but only ruled for 2 years. He died in 323 BC. And of course, what happens then? Who will have this? His vast empire was split into 3. So one chunk is Syria and the adjacent areas. It falls to Seleucus. Now this becomes the Seleucid dynasty, and the 5th member of this dynasty is Antiochus, called Epiphanes. Now this is the manifestation, Epiphanes, the actual appearance of the Godhead. He seemed to be majestic, but he was somebody who was keen on having uniformity. It's rather like communism, and it's rather sad because that involved a part of the known world, precisely that of the monotheistic bloc, which the Lord had been setting apart in order to prepare for the incarnation. And so we have, in this last period, the crunch. This king stirred up violent opposition by imposing Greek culture on all. Therefore that meant gymnasia and all the rest of it, but also Greek worship. So he has to try to stamp out other religion. It is true that these polytheistic religions are otherwise quite hospitable to other gods, but these other gods become nuisances if they want to be the only god, and so this is a real problem for them, Judaism, because they have a different concept. It's only one. That does not go down well. So the reading describes precisely the opposition that's going on, and the date would be around 165 BC. Torture and all the rest of it, having tongue and hands chopped off. It's not so different from what's going on in Islamic countries, it would seem. So, that is interesting for this very reason, that we have the hope of resurrection coming there in this beautiful speech. They are going with hope that they will get the limbs back. That hope is also found embryonically in some of the Psalms. In Psalm 16, we have the hope of seeing the Lord's face when we awake. Well, we awake after death. And here we have that beautiful expression, being under the shadow of his wings. That comes up in other parts of the Psalms as well, and we are familiar with it from Compline. It's a beautiful way to go to sleep, actually. The Thessalonians, as we have seen, is an interesting church because of the way that they were anticipating the end by not wanting to get too much involved with the world. But there are other problems too, and here it would seem that we have those enemies who have the monotheistic faith but want to impose yet again that element of the Judaic comfort zone. To be sure, let's keep the observances. So this problem comes again and again in the writing of St. Paul to different churches actually, but here it's there. But he is inviting that they should not get involved with enemies from within or without. Now, enemies without are also those of the surrounding culture, and he does indicate how it is difficult for them to be Christians in a hostile culture, but there are also problems from those who would want to influence their faith as such. He's writing from Corinth. Corinth, of course, had its own problems, but he is keen on maintaining the purity of the faith of Thessalonica. Now, the gospel is an important one. Interestingly enough, the Lord does refer to the Old Testament as his point of, in a sense, appeal. He appeals to what has authority within the Jewish mindset already. So, when referring to the passage of the burning bush and this verse which says that I am the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, he has in there already the evidence that these are not defunct, are not dead, are not non-existent. They are, of course, in the beyond and in God, but they have not ceased to be, and therefore that is the human condition. Once conceived, we do not cease to be. The body is conceived, but the Lord is obliged by the order of things to insert a soul in the body that is beginning to take form. But that soul is not going to be limited to the body in the sense that once in some way implanted, it is using that as an envelope, but that soul in itself has its own unceasing existence. No one will cease to be. And that is also the problem for those who are not in a good state in this world and therefore in the next, should they die in that state of lack of preparation. So it's an important message in this month of November. And we have also the whole teaching of the Lord with regard to the fundamental difference of the nature of the soul and therefore of its own mindset with regard to what is important. The instinct of man on this side of time is very much towards the carrying on of human life by creating new bodies. Therefore, the whole notion of procreation is fundamental to human nature, and therefore all that goes with it, the notion of having a partner, well, that, once the soul is separated, is different. The soul is not going to procreate, and therefore the instinct that goes with it is not there. And there, the soul is reduced to what it is. There's no distraction. How much distraction in this world, in this side of time, goes to the whole plethora of problems linked with procreation. If one looks at a young person well into middle age, much of the energy goes into either finding a partner or hanging on to her. It's all linked with this notion of procreation, which is pro tempore, for time alone. Well, what is this in aid of? Well, it's in aid of creating eventually new souls for glory. Therefore, the object is glory. And this comes through in the gospel, when the Lord actually says, pointing out the difference in nature of things in the beyond, that the souls of men are is angeloi, similar to the angels. So the soul is angelic in nature in some way. That is its pure spirit. And that is going to be the crunch, because with no distraction, with no body and anything that goes with it, the soul will see all as it is, and 1 second after departure from the body, it already sees it, and it sees itself and what it's heading for. It follows its own weight. There is that famous passage in the writings of Victor Hugo. Somebody asked who is the greatest French poet, and the answer given was Victor Hugo, hélas. Victor Hugo, alas. But he is a great poet, and he has this dialogue of the soul and the body. They are talking to each other, and eventually the soul leaves its companion forever, at least until the final union of the two, after the general resurrection. But the moment of departure is quite dramatic and indeed cosmic, and it ends with one strong word. The soul sees its plight and says, "Je suis damné." I am damned. So, that is something coming from a neutral author, writing in a period of enlightenment. Interesting. But it's something which is bound to face human beings, all human beings. The story there of what happened in the Russian campaign of Napoleon is quite frightening, when the soul of the Count came back to say that there was something in the beyond and he had been lost. Well, these things actually are part of human experience. The soul is not just a product of culture or belief or unbelief in the air. And no matter what the likes of RTE may preach and pump at us to the pulpit of the air, it doesn't change a thing. Nothing has changed. Who can change eternity anyway? We are on the receiving end of time and therefore eternity. And the soul after death follows the weight of its tendency. If it's ready, it'll go in the right direction. If not, it will propel itself against the light which it has fought and refused. It can't play both games. So it's kind of important in this month of November that we see things as they are. It's a month which calms down all months. For standing at the tomb, standing at the moment of it all ending and beginning, there is there a milestone. On one side time, on the other eternity, and in between the moment of death and what goes with it. Yes or no, I have made it. Media vita in morte sumus. In the heart of life, we are in death. When we have travelled on and moved afar upon the dawns that wake us, take us there where all things have their rest. When this our star that glimmers through our morn has bid us wear our solemn even's robe, and we no more have time to rhyme or riddle with our fate, but stand with understanding at the door, to which none came that hasted or was late. What will the droplet of a beam of time that we to ink did dye seem then? And then how will the sound of this once well-wound chime rebound across the closing age's glen? And will there be an hour to look again, and wish, half wish, we could 1 hour yet gain? When there is not a moment yet on earth that will be ours again, when gain is not in merriment or moments of high mirth known to have been, and when the measured lot of seconds tapped has tipped into our lap, and we have heard the word that utters all, for that no more is said, will one last tap, as soft as any other, be our call, and will tomorrow hold our yesterday well poised beneath its gaze? Will there be none to whisper, "Come again, we'll come again," to paths long trod, to actions long, long done? For we have sinned a little upon earth, and damned aeons clasped a little mirth. Or will we be upon the Isle of Doom a little brighter in our homeward gaze? The hollow of this passageway to gloom wilt shed a glister on our unmapped days? And will the stretching of our utmost yawn bring sleep too heavy for our crinkled smile? Will this, the hap and scheming of our dawn, there seen again, bring pain or rest awhile? Will we have been when we can be no more? And these, the happy moments that we were to be, one day to be, when nevermore they can e'er chance to be, will they be there upon the cosmos standing to end all that never shall have been by one stroke's call?